want to say thanks for having me here. Again, my name is Dave ZOHROB. I work at this company called AngelList, and I want to thank Etohum for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So what I want to do is talk about what if I could give you like one tip, right? One weird old tip that companies have been using for decades to supercharge their growth. It's just one tip, right? You'd probably want to know what it is, right? Well, I'm going to tell you, but not right now. First, I want to say that everybody here that's spoken before me has already covered a lot of really important stuff that you're going to need if you want to use this one weird old tip, right? You're going to need first to have your metrics totally down, okay? This is the assumption for the whole talk. You got to have your metrics covered. Whatever service you use, whatever third-party, internal stuff, you need to have your metrics covered, right? Everybody touched on this, Justin, Bernard, Matt from 500 Startups. You got to have it covered. So that's number one. Number two, you have to keep experimenting, okay? So this assumes that you have your metrics in place and that you can run your experiments. So those are my assumptions, and we're going to move on to that one weird old tip. But first, I'm going to tell you a story. And this story is about a fake startup. It's called Growthly. That domain is actually available if anyone wants to buy it. But let's just pretend for a second that you're the founder of this startup, right? Let's say it's a marketing tool for growth hackers. I don't know exactly what it does, but it's a great tool, right? You've spent the last year plus of your life working on this tool. You've built up your team. You've been working on the product. You've been iterating. You raised some seed money. You've been doing all the things that you're supposed to do before you launch a product, right? You've been blogging, guest blogging, tweeting. You built up even this email list of 10,000 people who have given you their email address, and they're super excited to hear about Growthly. And in this story, today's the day. Today is launch day, right? Today is the day where all of your hard work, all of your excitement comes to a head. It's time to show Growthly to the world. And you're the founder of this startup. You're about to push that button that's going to email all those 10,000 people that just can't wait to check out your product. How many people have launched something, have founded a company here? Anyone? Fair number? This is like the most exciting time, right? You're about to launch your product, right? You've got your team together. This is it, right? Now, what I want to do in the midst of all this excitement is pause and look at the other, whoa, I just went way ahead. Pause for a second and think about, let's say like you're one of those 10,000 people that's on that list, right? And I think that when we're making our products, we like to think that, we send an email out, and in this perfect, quiet room, somebody receives the email, and they read it through from start to finish, and then they consider the message that we've told them, and they say, oh yeah, Growthly is definitely that thing that I want to solve my problem, right? But the reality is, this is what the other side of it looks like, right? Somebody's at work, right? They're eating their lunch, their burritos all over their desk, right? The phone is ringing, tweets are coming in, their boss is like screaming at them, right? And in the middle of that, they're trying to eat their lunch, they're trying to do a good job at work, they're just trying to get their job done, right? And they get an email that says, Growthly just launched, right? And then they think to themselves, oh, I have no idea what this is, and they archive the email, right? So the point of this little story is that there's this massive gap between you and your audience. It's massive, right? We, as product creators, we spend so much time thinking about our products, thinking about our services. We know the ins and outs, right? Everyone that we know uses the product because we work with people who use it. Our friends like our product, they use it, right? We are so far away from that person on the other side that's getting that message, whether it's an email or a tweet or whatever it is. They have their own life going on, right? They have their own work, they have their own needs, their own desires, and there's this huge gap in between you and them, right? So I'm going to tell you my weird old tip, and it's going to help you bridge that gap. The weird tip is that empathy is the key to growth, okay? Empathy is the key to growth. And what do I mean by that? Empathy means understanding people. Empathy is the ability to think about something from somebody else's point of view, think about their feelings, understand their feelings. That's the key to growth. Okay, so in this talk, I want you to use empathy to close that gap between you and your audience. And I'm going to give you a few different ways of thinking about that so we can narrow that massive gap. So the first step to empathy, because empathy is about understanding people and their feelings, you need to understand people. So I'll talk a little bit about people in general. And then we're going to talk about empathy in particular and how we can apply it to our products. And then we're going to talk about moving from empathy to influence, because I feel like you can't influence people unless you understand them and understand where they're coming from. And finally, we'll hopefully use that influence to grow our products. So let's talk about understanding people. There's all kinds of people in the world. You might think it's a little bit weird to make these massive generalizations. And on top of that, there's all kinds of products in the world. And most of the products that we work with are brand new, right? The web wasn't even invented until '89, Google in '99, Facebook, Twitter, iPhone, they all happened within the last 10 years, right? And one of the things I keep thinking about is that, for example, the App Store in the US launched in 2008. That means that every app that you use and love is 6 years old or younger, probably younger, right? It's a massive, multi-billion-dollar business. It's all brand new, right? And even the term growth hacking is new. Growth hacking, from what I understand, was coined as a term 4 years ago, right? So we're in this brave new world with all these new products, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that the people on the other side of this, the people that actually use the products, they're just the same people. It's the same people that use the web as use Google, as use Facebook, as use Twitter. It's the same people that are going to use whatever it is that you're selling, right? The products change over time, but the people don't change. The people are the same people using all of these products, right? And thankfully for us, people have been around for a long time, and we've had a long time to figure out what people are like and how they react to different situations. So what I like to do, and what I did when I was first getting started in this business, was to read a bunch of books as much as I can, read a bunch of blog posts as much as I can. But I'd like to focus in this talk on some lessons that I've learned from non-technical people, from books that have been around for a while, the masters. These are the 3 books that I would recommend to anyone who's trying to maximize their understanding of people. The first one is called Influence. It's by this dude from Arizona, Robert Cialdini. He's like a psychology PhD. This book's been around for 30 years. It's been translated, reprinted a zillion times. I'm going to go into a lot of detail on this book later, so I'll gloss it over. There's also Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist as well. He's run a zillion experiments on people and how they react and how we process information, and specifically how we process information when we're distracted, which is one of those, basically the key aspect of being in the modern world is distraction, right? You're all watching this talk, you have your computer open, you're tweeting, I'm talking, other people are talking. That's the modern world, and Daniel's done a lot of research about that. And the third book I'd highly recommend is called Tested Advertising Methods. It's by this dude, John Caples. We like to think in the growth hacking world that, again, everything we do is new, everything is modern. But really, all this A/B testing methodology that we do, testing headlines and subject lines, it all comes from, at least from what I understand, from this early 20th century dude, John Caples, who in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s was applying super advanced A/B testing and multivariate testing to direct mail and catalog sales, right, where they would actually mail people physical catalogs and A/B test different copy and pricing and all this stuff. So this stuff has been happening for a really long time. And I think that we can learn a lot from these guys, even though they're not growth hackers, they're not bloggers, right? So the lesson from all these books, because we can't read them all right now, the lesson is that people don't change. And in fact, people are predictable. People are predictable, and that's great for us as marketers, right? That's great for us as growth hackers, because we can learn from the experiments that other people have run and run our own experiments and see if those work for us, right? So people are in this environment most of the time, right? Especially if you're building any kind of SaaS product or a consumer product. Like this image is probably not even close to like how crazy most people's environments are, right? People work in open offices with hundreds of other people, or people are waiting for a train and IMing someone and watching a YouTube video, and then they get some push notification or email about your product. Like that's people's first exposure to your product, right? Not like the perfect world where they're going to deeply consider everything. Like people exist in this world, right? People are tired, they're lazy, they're bored, they're distracted, right? And we have to get their attention, right? They're not going to change. We have to change our products, right? We're not going to be able to change that dude who's eating his burrito on his computer. I mean, I think that's a bad call in the first place. But we're going to need to change our products to meet people where they are, right? So that's where I think empathy comes in. Empathy, again, is the ability to understand people and to understand things from their point of view. And I've got a few quotes in this presentation. They're mostly from these old, dead white guys in the early 20th century. And I think the reason I wanted to use these older quotes is just, again, to show that, yes, we're in a brave new world of technology, but really nothing has changed here. Henry Ford invented, the automobile, the assembly line, and he said, if there's any great secret to success, it lies in the ability to get to the other person's point of view and see things from that person's point of view as well as your own. So what Henry Ford is saying, billionaire guy, reshaped our entire landscape. He's saying you got to have empathy in order to succeed. In fact, it's the one thing you need to succeed. So what I'd like to do in applying this to our digital products is to say every time you're looking at something like a growth strategy or a new feature on your product, you want to look at it through the lens of empathy. And that means looking at it from the point of view of your user, not just from what you want, but from what they want. So the easiest place to start when you're talking about empathy is to start with your pitch, right? Because that's usually the first thing that people see. And I think Justin talked a little bit about this, about changing just one line of their landing page, led to a massive boost. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. The classic line that I've heard about this is from this old German guy, Theodor Levitt. He says, people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole, right? People don't want what you're selling, they want to solve their problem, right? And my modern take on this is that nobody wants to sign up for your website, right? Nobody gets up in the morning and says, oh, geez, I just can't wait to sign up for another website, and I have to get another username, and then figure out what the password requirements are. Oh, I need a capital letter and a symbol and whatever, right? No, nobody wants to do that. What they actually want is to solve their problem, and they put up with the other stuff if you solve their problem, right? So I want to talk about a really good pitch here. Pingdom is a product that we use at AngelList. I have no real connection to them other than as a customer, but I think that they do a really good job. What their product does is it tests your website to see if it's up or down, if people can use it. And they test it from 50 different places around the world. They generate these really cool uptime reports that tell you, okay, you had 99.87% uptime. And they have all these really tweaky features for developers. It's a really cool product, right? But you don't see any of that when you go visit their webpage. I just happened to see this when I was putting the presentation together. Their one-line pitch is, if your website goes down, what would that cost you, right? Not we have 50 testing centers around the globe, but this, to me, encapsulates the value of their product in one sentence, right? And if you wanted to buy this and you took this to your boss, they would say, oh, yeah, sure, of course you can pay $9 a month for this, right? We need to know when our website goes down. So this, to me, is a great example of an empathic pitch, a pitch that focuses on the problems of other people and not on what Pingdom has done for themselves. I'd like to look at lifecycle emails in the same way. So just to review, we've talked about lifecycle emails a little bit. I think Matt went into a lot of detail about them. But just a quick recap, a lifecycle email is something that you send a user or customer at a certain point in your site, right? Let's say you have an e-commerce site, and the user adds something to their cart, and then they don't buy. So you might send them an email saying, hey, why didn't you buy this, or you should think about buying this. Or they sign up for your site, and a week later you want to check in with them and say, how's it going, right? So I think if you look at everything, if you start looking at everything through this lens of empathy and thinking about what the user actually wants and what they want to do, it might change the way that you write these lifecycle emails. So lifecycle emails should always be helping users. And I'll give a couple examples. The first one is a bad example. And I don't want to pick on Facebook, but Facebook sends me these emails all the time because I don't really log in that much anymore. And basically what the email says is, hey, Dave, some stuff happened on Facebook. You haven't been around in a while. You should come back, right? But the way they go about doing this is totally insane. Like basically, I blocked out the names just because I would feel bad about singling actual humans out in case these slides actually got out there. But basically, some dude I don't know commented on a photo of somebody that I haven't talked to in 10 years, right? And Facebook wants me to go to Facebook to check it out, right? And I'm thinking, this is great. Like, I don't care at all about this, right? And this, to me, is an example of a company. Somebody at Facebook said, oh, some people aren't coming to the site enough. We should write an email that gets them to come back to the site, right? But to me, this email is all about Facebook and not about me. Like, they haven't done enough to say, like, what would Dave actually want to come back to Facebook? They just said, oh, we'll just crank these things out, right? And I'm sure that it works for some percentage of the time. They have a lot of really smart people there. I'm sure they wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't do something. But what it does for me is make me unsubscribe, right? Because this is really annoying. So that's a bad example. Let's give a good example. So I signed up for this service called Buffer. I don't actually use it, but what Buffer does is it like queues up your tweets so you can tweet at various times of the day without actually having to like be there. So you don't you're not always tweeting at 3 a.m. or whenever you're awake, right? So I signed up for Buffer to see what it's all about. I'd heard some good things. And the second I signed up, I got this really amazing email. And the reason it's amazing is that it starts with the subject line. The subject line says, Joel from Buffer, it's amazing to have you on board. And I'm thinking, that's awesome. This dude is so happy to have me use his website. He sold me an email. Of course I know it's a fake, it's an automated email, but it still feels good, right? And the first paragraph of the email says, I'm guessing it's not every day you sign up for a new service. That's why I want to make sure everything's in place for you. You feel welcome and at home. If you ever need to contact us, here's how to do it, right? This is like, to me, pretty much the best possible thing that they could send me, right? So now I know immediately if I have a problem, who to talk to. Plus, I have these warm, fuzzy feelings of feeling good about this service, right? So to me, this is a really stark difference between the Facebook-centric email where they're saying, come to Facebook, come to Facebook, come to Facebook, and this email is about me. How can we help you, is what this email says, right? And that, to me, is exactly what applying the lens of empathy to your product is all about. I can give you another example. This is from my own work. So I work at AngelList. We have a lot of products. We mostly help startups get fundraising. We also have a pretty popular product that helps startups find people who want to work at startups, mostly engineers and sales and marketing, but also design, product management, HR, et cetera. The product's been around for a couple of years now, and we have 100,000 candidates, 5,000 startups. I actually looked, we have 13 startups recruiting on AngelList in Turkey, which I feel good about. I feel like that number should be bigger. But we're almost everywhere in the world at this point, which is great. And so when I took over the product recently, I had to think, what are we going to do to improve our onboarding process? And if you're looking at it through the lens of empathy, you have to say, well, what does the user want when they come to our website? Well, they want to get a job, right? They want to get a job at a startup. Most of our traffic comes from people Googling startup jobs, and we have really good page rank. We come up close to the top or at the top. So they come to our website, they land on a page that used to look like this, and they're saying, how do I find a job, right? So the dude that designed this web page, so this page actually looks like exactly like what our product looks like if you're logged in. And this is a principle that I think is called show, don't tell, which I think works for some companies, but I don't think it worked for us, and I can tell you why. But basically, most of this stuff, you get a big list of startups here. Most of this stuff actually kind of leads you down to a dead end if you're not signed up, right? We would show you, there's like a button to see how many messages you've received from startups. Well, that doesn't help me, right? There's a bunch of really kind of complicated filters that you can drill down. None of this stuff is super discoverable, right? So we had like a decent conversion on this page, but nothing amazing, right? So if I were to analyze it, I'd say it has this show, don't tell policy, which works for some people, but not for us. There's a lot of dead-end clicks there. People can click around on a lot of stuff that doesn't help them get to their goal, right? And if you look at it, there's almost no text. It says apply privately, no middleman, see salary up front. That's the entire explanation for the page, right? So if you don't already know what you're looking at, this page doesn't necessarily help you. So one of the things I did over the summer was think, okay, we got to redo this. We want to think about what people want, and we're going to make it look a little bit more like a landing page. Not so much show, don't tell, but tell before we show them. So it looks something like this now. This is not that great looking. I'm not a great designer. But we simplified a lot of things, right? And the biggest changes is that we went from 2 buttons at the top to 1. So from 2 buttons to just 1, find a job, right? And Justin also talked about this. I think others talked about this. Having a CTA, a call to action, that is very specific and action-oriented versus just sign up also makes a difference. So by just changing the text on that button from sign up to find a job, that was a 30% boost right there. But also removing extra elements, making it so that you can't click on all kinds of things and run into any kind of crazy dead ends. And we also added a little bit more text so that we can at least explain to someone if they got here what the heck they're looking at and what we do. The biggest final change was that we force people to sign up if they really want to dig into the jobs. And of course, when you force people to sign up, you're going to get more signups. They're not necessarily going to be the best users, but we made that call because we're thinking back to what the user actually wants. The user wants to find a job, and we want to help them find a job. And previously, if they ran into any trouble, they were digging around the site, looking at all the startup jobs. If they ran into any trouble, they might just stop using the site, and we'd have absolutely no chance to contact them, right? So by at least getting them to sign up and give us an email address, we were able to email them and say, oh, hey, we noticed you started looking at jobs, you didn't apply to any, or did you have any trouble? Can we help you out? So overall, the first revamp of this page increased our conversion by 90%, and we've since doubled it again, just by going through these iterations of trying to help people get to where they want to go. So that's what I want to do for everything that we do. As soon as I have the resources and time, I'll do it for everything on AngelList, right? You got to look at all of your product and growth strategies through the lens of empathy. Everything you do, every growth strategy, whether it's a lifecycle email or a landing page or anything, everything you do should help your users achieve their goals. I think that will really help improve your conversion as well. So now that we understand empathy a little bit, I think you can move on from empathy to influence, right? Once you understand who your users are and understand where they're coming from, then you can try and nudge them in the direction that you want to go. So that's the next step in my building block here. Here's another quote from another old dude. The dude says, when dealing with people, remember that you're not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures bristling with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity. This is what people are actually like. If we go back to that picture of the dude with his burrito all over his computer, people are not completely rational creatures. People are predictable, and people don't change. And we can use that to our advantage as growth hackers and marketers, right? So when I told you we could learn from the masters, this dude is one of the masters, Robert Cialdini. Highly recommend the book, gonna plug it one more time, and I'm gonna dig into some of the principles of influence that he outlined in this book. So there's 6 of them. There's reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. And it's amazing to me that this book, published 30 years ago, and these 6 types of influence, which seem really simple on the surface, can cover almost every situation that you might encounter when you're growth hacking, right? And so I'm going to give some examples of each of these, and I'm going to say that your goal when you're working on a strategy or working on your product is to use as many types of influence as you possibly can. And you get bonus points if you use all 6. If I could give you a prize, I would, but the prize is really going to come from your customers and your users. So first, reciprocation. You see this all the time, right? Give us your email address, we'll give you a free ebook, right? Justin was just talking, he said they would send people $50 Amazon gift cards, and then they got a 100% conversion rate for those people to come, call, and talk to them, right? That's reciprocation. People want to repay a debt, even if that debt is something that they didn't even ask for. The second one is commitment and consistency. We're like very apt to just follow a flow, right? So I was renting a car the other day, and I started answering yes to a bunch of questions that these people were asking me, like, What's your email address? I would like to get my rental receipts in my email. Yes. There's a really long paragraph, but it sounds like I'm going to be really smart if I click yes, yes, and you click yes again. And what this is actually doing is subscribing you to like an incredible amount of marketing emails. The other example of commitment and consistency, I saw this when I was researching this talk. This is like a really incredible pop-up when I was trying to leave a blog. In order to close this window, you have to click a button that says, no thanks, I don't care about great onboarding, right? Which is like incredibly manipulative. Who wants to click that, right? Like who's going to commit to saying, I don't want that? The next one is social proof. We use it all the time at AngelList. I'm sure you use it all the time in your products, right? If you want to recruit on AngelList, we have 5,800 startups there. We have 110,000 candidates, 7,000 designers, right? These numbers just make you think, oh, how can this possibly be a bad place if 100,000 people are already there, right? Liking is the next one. It's a little bit hard to demonstrate in just one slide. I think that we at AngelList benefit from it quite a bit because our brand has been around for a long time and people feel really positive about it. So like one of the things, for example, that one of our developers did was he got these big foam peace hands made. That's our logo. And he started sending them around to some of our users and people who raised money on our site. And Twitter was blowing up with these pictures for a while. And it's not, you can't directly translate that into a conversion necessarily, but people are more likely to interact with and be influenced by people and brands that they like. Another one is authority. You see this all over the place. Anytime you see a wall of logos on a startup's homepage, like as featured in TechCrunch and Mashable and whatever, they're appealing to the authority of those groups to like lend themselves their own credibility, right? So in AngelList case, when you're signing up to post a job, like, well, DuckDuckGo does it, Tinder does it, Greylock, all these VCs do it. Well, we must, it must be good, right? We're appealing to the authority of those companies. And finally, scarcity. This one is incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. eBay is really good at this. They have this timer running down on every product, right? And humans just get to this place where they act so irrationally around a timer. Like every sale, every holiday sale you go to where they say it's 12 hours left, right? It's an incredibly powerful lever to get people to act. So scarcity is that last lever, and it's super, super powerful. So now that you see these 6 kinds of influence, what I like to do when I'm just browsing around or when I'm working on my own product is to look at stuff and try to score it based on all 6 of those influence types, right? So you can look at this startup jobs page, and you see already there's some social proof, 5,000 of the best startups. We appeal to authority down here with these company logos. We're also hoping that you like us and like our brand. That's why we send those foam hands out. So we got at least 3 here, at least 3 of the types of influence. And maybe you can count liking also if you assume people like Medium and Yelp and Secret, where if you like those guys, well, those guys are here too. Another really good example that I'm not tied to at all is a company called Humble Bundle. What Humble Bundle does is they get a group of software together, like usually games, basically, and you're allowed to pay what you want to get all of those games, and some percentage, or all of it, goes to charity. So Humble Bundle, I would kind of cut up their homepage to show it here, but they hit a lot of buttons. You'll notice there's a timer in the upper right. They say time is running out. They have a timer going downhill, right? So that's your scarcity right there. You have social proof. You have the number of things that were sold. You have the top contributors and how much they gave. You get the average amount that people gave for this thing. There's a social proof there, and there's also kind of a commitment consistency vibe there. Nobody wants to think that, oh, I'm going to give below average. I'm not a below average kind of giver, right? I'm going to at least give the average, right? So that tends to push people towards acting more. There's some liking involved. Their brand is really cool. Sega is also a brand. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s and liked playing video games, that's probably a brand you have positive associations with. And they also appeal to authority down at the bottom as featured in TechCrunch, CNET, whatever, right? So they're hitting 5 buttons on my count here. They don't get the prize, but they're pretty close. I'm sure this homepage does really, really well for them. So like I said, empathy is the building block for the 6 kinds of influence, and your goal all the time is to use as many kinds of influence as possible when you're building your sites, when you're working on your lifecycle emails, when you're doing anything. You want to hit as many of those buttons as you can. So I just want to wrap up and conclude what we talked about here. The one weird old tip for growth is empathy. Empathy is understanding people. So you should look at everything in your product, every piece of your marketing, through the lens of empathy. You got to remember, every time you're doing something, there's a massive gap, just unbelievably massive, between where you are and where your audience is. And it's empathy and influence that are going to get you across that gap. So understanding people leads you to empathy, which will lead you to influence, and then, hopefully at the end, growth. Thanks very much.